Good afternoon, everyone, or evening, depending on what part of the globe, the sphere of Earth you find yourself in. Welcome to Perspective Shift, live with me, Colby Martin. And as I keep saying, this show's about to get a new title. We're about to just keep Perspective Shift as just the name of my Substack newsletter and change this to a different title, but I haven't yet figured it out. So I'm still taking subjections, which are subjective suggestions. So I'm taking those. But anyway, welcome. Today's topic, we're continuing my month-long celebration of The Shift, which came out a year ago, and I'm sort of relaunching it because it wasn't the greatest time a year ago. And so I'm talking about this all month long. And today we're going to talk about what people have responded as the most surprising aspects of their faith shift, the things they didn't really see coming. And you can see that on the screen. The top three things were a feeling of lightness, joy, peace, feeling closer to God, and then also gaining some fresh perspectives, whether that's on the new way to see things or a fresh perspective on, wow, I used to believe that, or wow, those used to be my people. Man, did not see that coming. So we're gonna do that for the first part of the show, and then coming up with the later part of the show, I'll be joined by my good buddy, Pastor Joshua Scott. Look at that handsome fellow there on the screen. And him and I are going to have a conversation about what it's like to shift in your faith while also being a pastor. That'll be a fun conversation. So look forward to having Josh on here in a bit for the program. But for now, I'm glad you're here. And I just say welcome to, for now, still titled Perspective Shift. Oh, fantastic. Who's with us today? We've got Phil Spencer in the house with the yays. Good to have you, Phil Spencer. Glad you're here. Jacqueline. Hi, Jacqueline. Glad you're here watching over on the YouTubes. By the way, yes, I do see all the comments on Facebook and YouTube, so feel free to say hi and interact and ask questions and push back. And who do we got? Mercy. Mercy coming in hot from Minneapolis. Actually, I don't know if it's hot there. It's mild here. It's like 72. We got Susan in the house who's saying hi to me and hi to Mercy, because that's what we do here on Wednesdays. We create cross community. You're all not just here for me, you're here for each other. And I think that's pretty fun. Alex. Hi, Colby. It's my first time on the live show and I'm so excited sitting here in my glass of wine, 11 p.m. here in Germany. We have just now gone transnational, continental. So good to have you. I've got my glass of water. I might turn this into wine later. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know how to do that. I'm stoked that you're with us here, Alex. It is very good to have you on the show. Yes, James even got home in time to catch this. Welcome, James. Glad you're here. Cheryl Lyle says, this is going to be good. I think she's referencing the conversation with Josh later. So that's exciting. Josh right now is currently waiting in the green room so he can hear all the things we say and see all the things we put on the screen. So give me a little wave, Josh. Yep, I can see him. He's handsome, but you can't. What else we got here? Hey, Jules is in the house. Glad you're here, Jules. So glad to have you. Oh, I love this. Mandy's like, what up, Alex? Welcome. First timer. That's so fun. Colton is here. Colton Barnaby, where you been? I feel like it's been a few weeks. I always love when you're here, man. Good to have you. Tucson is in the house. Hi, Kristen. Glad you're with us. I love Tucson. Anna Banana's in the house. Hi, Anna. Good to see you. Oh, Cheryl, you're in New England. I wonder if I knew that. Irregardless, which isn't a word, but my college professor used it anyway. I'm glad to have you here. And then John Warwick is here. Hi, John. Glad to have you back. Jesse. Hi, guys. There you are, Jess. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. All right. Let's get into, and then one more from the UK. We are just all over the globe. Hi, Luke Benjamin. Good to have you here, Luke Benjamin. And then we got Melanie coming in from Pennsylvania. We've got Fred from Indy. This is a wonderful group here today. I'm really excited. About 30 minutes ago, I was like, I'm kind of tired. I think I should get some more coffee, but if I have coffee after 12 o'clock, then I won't be able to sleep. Oh, well, I'll just push through. And then immediately, boom, I'm on and I see all of you and you're with me and I'm just jazzed. I am here for this. So if you just tuned in, welcome to Perspective Shift. I am Colby Martin and this is my live show that I do every Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific. And I stream here on YouTube and Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook and you have not yet done this little thing where you can click like, feel free to like my page on the Facebooks if you want. This is completely up to you. And then also if you're watching on YouTube and you want to hit subscribe, that would be fantastic as well. It's good to have you here. And you can see down scrolling at the bottom the little URL if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, Perspective Shift. You can do that at any time. But let's get to it. This is enough of the introduction, enough of the tomfoolery. Let's get to part one of maybe why you're all here today. We're continuing this conversation around the shift in our faith, the shift away from conservative / evangelical. Sometimes I use those synonymously. Sometimes they mean something a little bit different. Point being, moving away from like conservative Christianity and towards something that's more progressive. That's what my book is about. And we've been talking about it all month. And I've been asking you to share with me what your experience has been with your faith shift. Last week, we talked about the hardest part of your faith shifts. That was a beautiful conversation. Top 3 answers had to do with loneliness, beliefs, and relationships. And then today, for this week, the article that went out this morning, for those of you who are subscribed, is about what's the most surprising. What's been the most surprising part of your faith shift? And I've got this little photo there. What's been the most surprising part about your faith shift? And I gotta say, I was actually a bit surprised by some of what you were surprised by. And, you know, maybe I shouldn't have been because a lot of it makes sense, but still, I just didn't know what to expect. And I wasn't expecting so many of you. And I love it. I was just like, oh my gosh, people, they have feels. Sometimes people just need permission to voice their feels. So thank all of you for sharing with me and with us what has been most surprising. So this is what I'll do. I'll read through the article, pause periodically to engage with you if you want to ask questions or have any comments. And then in about 20 minutes or so, we'll bring Josh into the screen and we'll have a conversation with him about shifting faith as a pastor. All right, let's get into it. Here we go. So it begins like this. Last week, I invited you to share with us what surprised you most as it pertains to your shifting away from conservative evangelical Christianity. And I was not prepared for the responses. Weepy face. Which, by the way, some people use that emoji as like sadness, which I guess makes sense. I tend to use it as like happy joy cry. How do you use that emoji, if you use that emoji? Anyway, I wasn't prepared for how beautiful your answers were, both in the quantity and the quality of your responses. It floored me. Thank you all for showing up. Seriously, thank you for showing up and opening yourself up in this way. Your beautiful and vulnerable shares, they moved me. So I want to do the same thing today that I did last week and attempt to reflect back to you as I curate all of my observations from all of the different sources of people who responded to this question and make some observations about what sort of rose to the top. What were some of the things that were most often shared? And then I've got a little link there. If you missed last week, that was when we talked about the hardest part of your shift. You can check out the video on YouTube, or you can go to my Substack page to read it if you want. So with regards to what surprised you the most in your shift, the most common answers fell under the categories that I'm calling feeling lighter, being closer to God, and then gaining a fresh perspective. Let's dive in. First is lighter. One theme that came up over and over again in people's responses had to do with this genuine surprise at the peace and the joy that resulted from being both liberated from these old ideas and then embracing new ones. Reading through these comments, I kept thinking about Jesus' words in Matthew 11, where Jesus quoted to say, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I love that. And as I see it, I think that means something. And I think it means that there's something about the way of Jesus that should, I don't use should very often, but it should feel light. There should be a sense of lightness to the way of Jesus. I'm not saying like easiness or that it should never feel challenging or that we should never run into complications. But there's just should be a lightness to it. And many of you have reflected that when you shifted or are shifting, that you picked up on some of that lightness. If instead there's like a heaviness to your faith, like a burdensome list of do's and don'ts, or a bunch of boxes that need checked, I don't know, that just doesn't sound to me like the yoke of Jesus. I love how one person on Instagram put it. Michaela said, quote, "The pressure's off." What surprised you most about your faith shift? The pressure's off. Yeah, the pressure's off. I just love that. Now, this sentiment often gets misunderstood within conservative and evangelical spaces to imply, oh, once you become progressives, you all just do whatever you want. And the straw man drives me nuts. It just drives me nuts, that straw man. That's just not the point of what we talk about when we talk about the pressure being off, or this lightness. To speak of the pressure being off is like in the words of Amy, who said, "I used to feel awe and fear, but now what surprises me most is the joy, lightness, joy, peace." These aren't just fruits of the Spirit, to quote Paul, but they are like legitimate emotions and experiences that people have when they no longer are forcing themselves to try and believe things they know that cannot be true, or act in ways that sort of repress and heap upon them shame. California Dreamer on Instagram said, "I thought I would feel lost in shame forever when I shifted, but it turns out on the other side of the faith shift, like there really is a there, and it is so freeing." Love that. So freeing. Now, I'm not suggesting that no conservative Christians ever know things like peace or joy or fruits of the Spirit. Obviously, that's not the case. But I don't think that we should either dismiss the myriad accounts of people like Amber Lee who say that what surprised them most about their shift was the peace and the genuine happiness that I couldn't ever seem to quite grasp before. And she says also a greater hope for the world. And there so many people have that experience. Like, I didn't really know what this peace and lightness and hope was. I thought I kind of tasted it a little bit, but now that I've sort of moved away from some of that and shifted towards these more open, expansive ideas about the kingdom of God and who God is and who Jesus was, suddenly that lightness and that peace and that joy is accessible and experienced. And Amber's not alone. Many of us feel like that, have felt that way. There's a peculiar lack of levity to evangelical theology, in my opinion. And that levity appeared once we started to shift away from it. Suddenly, following Jesus felt light. We feel freer to be, freer to love. Almost as though shifting towards ideas that are more capital T true can lead to more freedom. "And you shall know the truth," Jesus once said, "and the truth shall set you free." Come on now. Or as another person put it, the freedom and depth of love for myself and for others and for creation and for the divine that eventually came. This freedom to love was what most surprised J.M.J. Middleton. Surprising indeed. Okay, I'm going to pause there before we go into the next section and just see if any of y'all over here have some things that you're saying. Yes, James is with me. All the feels. So many feels, Mercy. Oh, Barry Cashman, happy hour. Where are you coming in? Where are you coming in from, Barry? It's still water o'clock here in San Diego. Oh, Jules, that's sweet of you. Jules says it's because Colby creates a safe space to be vulnerable and explore our feels. I hope so. That is certainly one of my goals and one of my hopes. So the fact that you reflect that back to me means a lot. Thanks, Jules. Yeah. Mercy's like the yoke. The easiness of the yoke finally starting to make some sense. Oh, Jesse literally thought of this verse too when he shifted to progressive Christianity. Right? I love it. All right. Lightness is the love, Mandy says. Oh, I like this, Jacqueline. Jacqueline says it's like feeling peace versus feeling unsettled. I can absolutely relate to that contrast there. Alex adds, there's this lightness of being allowed to think your own thoughts. What a gift. What a freaking gift. I love it. All right. Barry's from Virginia. Okay, so that could be happy hour time for you. Absolutely, right? Because Virginia is that East Coast time. So you're like 5 o'clock there? I love it. All right. Colton has a shirt idea. Lose the yoke, get woke. Just brainstorming ideas here, but I like that one, Colton. All right, so let's go to the second thing that showed up most in people's responses to what surprised them most. And this I think was the one that surprised me the most. Not because it doesn't make sense, but I don't think I expected how many people would have reported this, I guess, as being the thing that surprised them the most. Okay, so anyways, let's keep going here. So I write this. While I anticipated the above responses about being surprised with all the lightness and joy and peace, I'll confess I didn't expect that just as many people, like legitimately, I think it was a tie when I added it all up, just as many people would report that they were surprised by how their shift led them to feeling closer to God. Here's a couple. Perry, the most surprising thing about my shift is that I feel closer to God. Here's Melanie. I feel much more grounded in my relationship with God. And then Paul, not the biblical Paul, although maybe, I don't know, maybe this Paul is the Apostle Paul, came back from the life and is now on Instagram. Paul was surprised at how much more I appreciate God and everything that is God. And then, I love this, even to the chagrin, I'm sure, of our conservative siblings in the faith, some shifters even reported that they now feel even closer to Jesus. Thank you, David, for naming that, as a result of their moving away from evangelicalism. And I wonder how much of this has to do with the way in which the evangelical conception of God is one that is, among other things, domineering, almighty God, a super judgy God, a God who honestly is kind of hard to get to know, hard to draw near to, even though we're told we're supposed to. And I know, they tell you, I used to tell you, that God is love and kind and compassionate, but then that gets followed up with, but also just and holy. And I reflected on this in chapter 4 of my book, The Shift, which I titled Talking, Thinking, and Feeling About God. And so I share a bit of an excerpt from the book here in chapter 4. And I write this. In the Lego movie, everything is awesome. In the Lego movie, the character Bad Cop, Good Cop reminds me of how I used to feel about God. Which God do I get today? The nice one who loves me and delights in my well-being? Or the scary one who's raging mad because I lusted during that Carl's Jr. commercial? The world many of us came out of teaches this sort of dual-natured God. It's a confusing combination of loving and merciful, yet wrathful and just. And by the way, just in this context always meant dispensing punishment to wickedness, as though the highest form of justice resembles retaliation and consequences. Come on, seriously, that's the best idea of justice that you can come up with. Progressive Christianity, I believe, gifts us with the renewal of the biblical vision of what's called restorative justice, which suggests that true justice looks much more like renewal and restoration, not just doling out death sentences to evildoers. And with a straight face, and I know because I must have delivered the line 100 times, pastors and theologians pontificate that God holds these two, I think clearly mutually exclusive, postures at the same time, love and judgment. I can imagine God jamming to Nash's 2017 hit as Olivia O'Brien belts the hook, I hate you, I love you, I hate that I love you. Which is it? Does God hate us or love us? Many of us were sold the lie that the answer is yes, both. No, can't be both. So I guess at the end of the day, I shouldn't have been too surprised that people reflect that when they left behind this confusing God, it would lead people to maybe feel closer to the divine. Plus, as another reader put it, abandoning the anti-LGBTQ beliefs of evangelicalism allows many people to finally be themselves and accept that they are loved just as they are. As Marissa said, I feel closer to God now than ever because I've allowed myself to be authentically me. That makes a ton of sense. All right, and then I'll pause now, and before I go to this last section, just check in with the comments here. Y'all are here for this today. And Josh, I'm using y'all to just represent your Southern roots. Y'all are here for this today. I love it. Look at all these comments. Yeah, it feels like freedom to ask questions without getting tackled. That's helpful, right? Yeah, Jesse, I was gonna say, if you're gonna use the word transition, just use shift. Come on, we gotta get this word out there. Always capitalize it too. I love you. You're great. What do we got here? James says, I talk to God a lot more instead of praying. I love it. And talking to God is, in my opinion, just one of the many things that we can do that sort of fall under this large umbrella of praying. But yeah, I think what you're naming is, in maybe some of our older evangelical contexts, there was a kind of a rigid and or constricted idea of what prayer is. And so it sounds like maybe you have experienced a broadening of that, which is awesome. Barry says, I now feel Jesus inside me, which is so fantastic. John asks, are you referring to Catholics as well as evangelicals? So give me a little bit more context to your question there, because I don't remember, or I don't know when in the video today you asked that question. So maybe let me know a bit more of what you're asking. I'd love to respond to that. Yeah, Jules says, when I was an evangelical, God always felt distant and unreachable. Alex has had problems with the approach of God the Father. You're not alone in that. Phil's like, now I want to see that Carl's Jr. commercial. Just skip it. I'm sure it's out there on YouTube, but it's not worth it. More falsetto singing. That's probably going to happen. Yeah, James doesn't feel like love at all. Totally agree. Oh, I love this, Kristen. Thanks for sharing. Kristen says, I'm very early in my shift, brought to the forefront by grief. I'm sorry. But as I read more books written by progressive Christians, I'm starting to find joy and trust again in the freedom of new ideas. I'm sorry for the grief and the suffering that found its way into your life. And 2, what grace that has shown up in that way to invite you to maybe new and or different and or deeper connection with the divine. I think it's Richard Rohr who talks about love and suffering as the 2 greatest avenues by which we can know God and know truth. Glad you're here, Kristen. Yeah, Phil, thank you. I've been for this series. I've used that apostrophe liberally. Shifted. It'll catch on. All right. Oh, I love this, Cheryl. During my shift, I don't feel guilty when I worship in new ways outside church walls. Yeah, that's a really good. So that takes us right now. That takes us now nicely into the third section here of fresh perspective. So this is the other thing that came up most often in y'all's responses was what I'm calling like a fresh perspective. So it goes like this. People that responded were surprised at either seeing things in a new way for the first time, so new parts of their Christian experience or new beliefs and ideas for the first time, or they were surprised at how they saw what they used to believe in a whole new, revealing and perhaps unflattering way. Tiffany said, I was surprised by realizing how much internal discomfort and distress I was willing to live with. I hear that, Tiffany. I remember being so bothered by some of the ideas of evangelical Christianity, and yet because it was biblical, we just had to suck it up. Well, the Bible says that settles it, so I know it feels really weird, but just gotta accept it. Just gotta deal with it. Or as another reader put, she found great comfort in realizing that the world actually is as complicated and gray as I thought it was. I love that, Bethany. You're like, the whole time I kind of feel like the world is a little more nuanced and gray, and yet so much of evangelical Christianity reduces it into this dichotomy, this binary, this black and white. And so then when you shift, you're like, I knew it. I knew this world was more complicated. I love that. For Susan, who said that she's always been a person who needs clear-cut answers. She's been most surprised not just by the fact that she doesn't really have definitive lists of what she believes anymore, but even more so that lack of definitive answer is okay. Actually, I think I'm okay with that. What a surprise. Fresh perspectives indeed, when we begin to let go of the need for certainty. Other readers were delighted by how their shift opened up all new ways of seeing and appreciating the Bible. And this has certainly been true for me as well. Gratefully Me says, what surprises me the most is that I now get to embrace a new journey through the Bible. I think that's pretty cool. Or as Phil put it, he was surprised at how it was actually diving deeper into the scriptures, that became the catalyst for his shift. Quote, it was my respect for and dedication to the authoritativeness of scriptures that led me down this path of his shift by listening to the scriptures and what they actually say. And then there were those who were most surprised by how the people from their old communities, aka their previous conservative evangelical Christian folk, they now seem illuminated with a new and slightly unflattering light. Like one reader put it like this, feels like the evangelical world from whence they came, quote, supports everything that Jesus would be against. Yeah. I think a lot of us, it's like, I don't know if it was blinders that we had on, or just a lens that kind of didn't allow us to see a lot of the, I'll say hypocrisy or double standards, or just the ways in which so much of that system doesn't, in my opinion, map on very well to the way and the teaching of Jesus. Another person on Instagram put it like this. I think it was most upsetting to see who was really a friend and who was just a brother or sister in Christ. And they never really cared when you left. Melissa Dixon, I think, is naming what many of us have experienced. Like, wait, so I changed my beliefs and now we're not friends anymore? Yeah, that's a surprise. I can totally relate to that. I too have been shocked at how un-Jesus-y so many of my former people are. And then I end the article with this. One reader shared that she's been most surprised by the way that her shift has impacted her husband, who isn't currently on a shifting journey himself. Notice the shifting with the apostrophe there. She noted that he's been picking up a few things here and there about how her faith shift is like doing a work on him. And it's kind of slowly doing this transformative work in him. And I just think that is so fantastic. It's so beautiful. And I say this, not to get too Bible-y, but then honestly, that's never stopped me before. But I'm again reminded of Jesus' words, quote, let your light shine before all people, that they might see your goodness. And now the text here says, glorify your Father in heaven. But if I can attempt to retranslate that in a way that both gets at the heart of what I think Jesus was saying, while also avoiding some theological baggage, I might say, who might see your goodness and celebrate that which is most real, most true, and most good. Let your light shine before all people so that they might see that lightness and that peace and that joy and that goodness. And in so doing that, in so witnessing to that, they will celebrate that which is most real, that which is most true, and that which is most good. What I've learned is that many Christians, on the other side of their shift, they end up looking like, sounding like, and embodying much more of what I imagine Jesus was actually like in real life. I know that's been true for me, and it's something that I am so very grateful for. All right, and then one more shameless plug to check out The Shift, a survival guide for becoming a progressive Christian. All right, here in a minute. Oh yeah, so this is my question for the next 7 days. Between now and next Wednesday, I invite you to, you can do this now on the Substack article. I'll get a graphic up on the gram and the face here in a bit. But the question for this next week is, what are you most grateful for as a result of your shift? Okay? And you can take that any way you like, whatever comes up for you in that. But when you think about your shift, what are you most grateful for? All right, I'm going to get rid of all that. Great. I'm going to tune in here to just a couple more comments, and then we're going to get to the man of the half hour, Pastor Joshua Scott. Okay, John responded. So John says, you mentioned the rigidity of evangelical teachings that constrict or hamper our relationship with God. Catholic teachings are similarly ritualized and affirmative. Yes, so this is why I oftentimes, John, will say conservative / evangelical Christianity, because I think that much of Catholicism, as I understand it, fits within sort of what I'm calling conservative Christianity, which is there's an expectation that you sign off on particular doctrinal beliefs. There's an expectation that you live your life with a behavioral standard that I think is not entirely lends itself towards freedom and wholeness and well-being. This is especially true within the Catholic and evangelical attitudes towards sex and sexuality. So yes, I oftentimes will imagine Catholic teaching in a similar vein when I talk about conservative Christianity, even though Catholicism and evangelicalism are wildly different from each other. All right, what else we got? Mercy enjoys the uncertainty, which I think some people find strange. And yet, once you practice it a little bit, it's like, actually, I don't know. And maybe I'm okay with that. It's fine. Yeah, Jules, I get this. Jules says, I look back now and I kind of cringe at how I used to be. Ugh, totally get that. In fact, that is what chapter 10, no, not 10, 9? Chapter 9. Yes, chapter 9 in the shift is called Relax. You've come so far. It's not going to find the, come on. Where is the text? Relax, you've come so far. What to do when you're mortified by your past beliefs and behavior. So, get that, Jules. Susan adds, shifting from a fearful God to a loving God has been transformative and freeing. Yeah, when you say it out loud, you're like, that makes sense, doesn't it? I love it. Phil, I think it's the second time Phil's trying to get me to rewrite the Bible. Might take me longer than a year, though. All right, we got some great comments here. These are all fantastic. I just want to get into our guest because it's a little bit past 2:30. So thank you all. Now I'm going to bring in our guest. And if at any point throughout our conversation with Josh, if you have any questions for him or for me or just comments, again, we'll put them all up there and we'll go to them. But would you do me a favor and welcome to the show, the one, and as far as I know, the only, Pastor Joshua Adam Scott. Hello, buddy.
Hello. How are you?
It's really good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Welcome to...
I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Being the man of the half hour is
Yes.
so much better than being the man of the hour. It takes off so much pressure.
Right? Less pressure. Like, all you have to do is just be glorious for the next 20 to 30 minutes. But good. I'm so glad you're with us. Josh, just to give our viewers a little bit of context about you and me, our friendship is about 6 years old. Goes back to, it goes back to Marco Island in Florida. And you and I met at a conference there, like a gathering of, that was kind of the early days of all these progressive Christian post-evangelical types. What are we going to do now that we're all out here leading these communities with no denomination, no network, any of that? Anyway, and you were, at that time, you were pastoring a church in Kentucky that you had been with for a while. So I guess here's where I'd like to start. Oh, and then you and I have a couple delightful moments in our life together. So Josh and I have the esteemed privilege of moving a fallen tree off of a mountain road so that our truck could continue climbing the mountains. I got to tell you, I've never done that with anybody before. So thank you for sharing that moment with me.
I have the video, and it popped up for me the other day. And
I haven't seen it in a while.
It's when I almost fell down the mountain. Like, that was my favorite part.
Because it was
watching it back.
This was like it was pitch dark, right? So it was only the light of the pickup truck that was shining, and it was raining, and we're out there. Anyway, I felt very. I'm gonna tread carefully here because this is potentially a heteronormative toxic masculine, but I felt very manly in that moment. Okay, I said it, and now I'm gonna asterisk and be like, come on, everybody see the rest of my work to know what I mean by that. But anyway, it felt very lumberjacky, and I grew up in Oregon, so lumberjacks are a thing. And then
I was proud of what we did.
I was proud of what we did too. And then also, you and I, another fun memory, is that we once took an Uber ride that I don't think it reached 2 blocks.
Oh, I don't think so at all.
Was it even a block?
Well, it was raining so hard and couldn't remember how far the coffee shop was away. And literally, when we got in the car and then she pulls up like 3 feet and we get out, and I was like, this person hates us. This person hates us, and rightly so.
Yeah, we didn't want to walk in the pouring rain, but like you said, we also didn't realize it would be such a short drive. We just felt so both foolish and also awesome, because if we would have known how short it was, we wouldn't have taken it, which wouldn't have given us the memory. It would have been one of a million memories that we remember. That time that we didn't take the Uber ride? No, nobody remembers that story.
No. And every time we're in the same place, I get so excited because I just figure something hilarious is going to happen.
That's reasonable.
Like, it just follows us around.
That's reasonable. All right, Josh, tell us a little bit about how long you've been a pastor, and where you came from and what you're doing now, and then we'll get into some of the questions that I have for you.
So I think I gave my first sermon in like 1997. So I was like 17 or 18 or 17, 16, I don't know. It was in the late 90s. I started pastoring when I was 20. And so I've been at it 20 years now. And when we met, I was pastoring a church in rural, I can't even say that word, but you know what I mean.
I do, yes.
Small Kentucky town.
We'll subtitle it for you later.
Kentucky is a red state, but where I lived in Kentucky was like magenta. And I started pastoring this church. It was a community church, and as most people know by now, that community churches tend to be a little more fundamentalist in their theology, and so it was sort of one of those things where people thought it was more progressive because of the music, because it was more contemporary music, but the theology was very, very fundamental. And my shifting, and I'm sorry, my kids, hold on 1 second.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It is all good. As anyone who knows me knows, I welcome all the kid noise. It is all good.
Good Lord. So anyway, and so I was pastoring, but when I took the job there, I was 23, and went in thinking I knew everything, as you're wont to do at that age.
Absolutely.
And there were seeds planted in my life, like around middle school, with some loss and some things that happened that I just sort of ignored over time. But then other things I was learning, and some college classes I took, and then experiencing all that, human beings, all that stuff sort of converged at 23 years old, pastoring this church in rural Kentucky, realizing that I can't give the sermons they want me to give if I'm going to be honest.
Right.
And so I ended up being at that church for 14 years, the whole time sort of at times feeling like I was free falling, at times feeling like I was going to leave the pastorate, at times feeling like I was going to leave the faith altogether. And so it's been quite a ride. And now I'm at Grace Point Church in Nashville, and love the work I'm doing and feel more committed and energized than ever.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to Kentucky just for a minute. So for 14 years there, now, was there a time when you felt super aligned at that church with like your inner beliefs and sort of your work outside, or did you always feel a little bit like you were not entirely honest with the church? Which might be that might be my words I'm putting in your mouth, but
yes, I mean, not looking back on it now, I definitely feel like there was a period of time where I said things in ways that could be heard by people who wanted something more progressive as progressive. Okay. And that's what I meant. Yeah. But that could still be palatable to people who are conservative. And I didn't realize how ultimately unfair that was to them until they'd been with me 10 years. And then we're like, wait, you've meant this the whole time? So, I mean, and I think you and I talked about this before, but I can look back in around 2003, 2004, somebody put the book Generous Orthodoxy in my hands for the first time, Brian McLaren's book. And I read that and I was like, yes, this makes so much sense. And then somebody gave me a Pneuma that Rob Bell had just produced. And that made and so all of that was happening. And so when I took the job, I wasn't where I am now, obviously, but I was already struggling with, I don't know what to say about this. I don't know what I believe about this particular thing anymore. I started dreading Christmas and Easter and Good Friday and all those things. Yeah. they just were just, it was wanting to give up. And I remember I got invited every year during Holy Week. A local church would do 12 o'clock noon services each day of Holy Week. And I got invited to Good Friday once, and this was 5 or 6 years ago. And I gave my sermon and then got a lecture on atonement theory from the pastor after it was over. And so, that stuff obviously developed over time, but just realizing I can't say the things they want me to say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. Even in hearing your response and going back to and by the way, quick side note, it really is like if at any point you need to attend to
Can you hear what's happening in my house right now? Can you hear it?
Yeah, and it's fine. Like people in the comment section are saying it's like Phil says, it's the sounds of real life. And Alex says, love to the kids. So it honestly, I want to help absolve you of any sort of like anxiety you might be feeling. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
But it's
WWE over here right now.
Good. But I made the comment, like, were there any times where you felt like you weren't completely honest? And I don't like how I phrased that, even though I was trying to get at a particular thing. And I think here's why, is because I don't think it's the same thing. Let me try this out. I'm practicing this out in real time. I don't think it's the same thing to say these two things. On one hand, a pastor is not being entirely honest with his congregation about what he, she, they thinks and feels. And then over here, a pastor maybe is conscious of what their particular community needs for their well-being, and maybe edits and or curates the things they say and how they say in a way to best serve the people. And I think there is a version that looks at those two things and maybe in a more cynical manner says, those are the same thing. Like doing this over here is really just not being honest. But I'm not entirely sure that I buy that. I think those can be two different things. What do you think about that?
I agree 100%. I think that there's a certain amount of I always felt like there would be a certain amount of irresponsibility if I just got up and said, I don't know about anything. I just don't know. Or just, sort of did stream of consciousness. Here's everything I don't believe anymore. I felt like that could be equally, hurtful to people and unhelpful to people. So I think there definitely is a tension. I think that obviously, I think as pastors, we should still be growing and learning and doubting and questioning all along the journey. So I think there's always things we're going to be processing that we're probably not necessarily saying right away, just because we want to be able to say something that sounds remotely coherent, and be able to respond to people's questions like, well, what about this? What about that? So I think there's I think you can go overboard either way, because I do think at times if you're, giving people stuff that you haven't even processed, that it could be, because then maybe you come out the other side of it and go, well, gosh, I disagree with everything I said 2 weeks ago because I hadn't thought about it long enough.
Yeah.
So I think that's very valid.
Yeah. You mentioned in your brief retelling of your pastoral history, you mentioned, I forget how you phrase it, but there were moments where you wanted to just pack the whole thing up. And I wonder if looking back, if you've been able to identify what were some of those pain points. Were there, if you had that experience more than once, was there something that sort of showed up? Like, what was it that when you look back is like that, if I were to have quit the whole thing, I could probably point at that as maybe one of the root causes, knowing that it's a number of factors and that being a pastor is just, even when all pistons are firing like as well as they can be, and you're at a congregation where you really can just share all of your thoughts and it's fine. Being a pastor is still really freaking hard. What comes up for you when you think about those near exits that you took?
I think for me, it was, if I could sum them all up it would just be feeling like I was being, like my humanity didn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, to disagree theologically or like those are all valid things to do. But it was in the process of that, feeling like some of these folks aren't seeing me as a human being.
Yeah.
And in some ways, as a public figure, that's what happens, right? People think they know you because you've told some stories in your sermons, but like deep down, they don't know the actual depths of your humanity. Like people who know you will, but I'm saying just people who listen to you. And like I'll give you one story. I remember in 2017, we had a foster placement at the time that we were hoping that would lead to adoption, and we found out that we were losing the placement. The same weekend we were processing saying goodbye to that placement, some people in the church who'd been around a long time, this is the church in Kentucky, like held a secret meeting where they all plotted how they would get rid of me. And so I'm processing this loss.
Knowing that you're going through this.
Yes. I guess it was the only day their schedules would align. And I remember like finding out about this meeting and also knowing we had plans. There's stuff we were going to do with this particular kiddo before she left us. And just saying, when somebody tipped me off, just saying, I got this thing over here. I can't go do that. I'm going to go spend time with our kiddo. And if you guys fire me before I get home, cool. Just let me know. But that was deeply hurtful. And that was sort of the big thing. But the reality is it was reflective of all those little, those little bumps and scratches that happened over the years where people ultimately just didn't see you as a human being. They tend to see you as just this purveyor of goods and services, or theological goods and services. And then when they don't like those, there's a cost to that.
Right.
So disagreement was never a problem for me. I welcome it. It was the not being able to meet each other at the level of our humanity that was just exhausting.
That hits, that hits home for me too, brother. That experience of feeling like, what is it about the fact that I'm a pastor that makes you think that I don't deserve to be treated like a human like everyone else? Like what is that? And the people that come to mind and the stories that come to mind for me when I felt like that, like, they're not bad people. They're not bad people. They're caught up in their own stories and their own pain and playing out the narratives that maybe they were given. And I just want to sometimes scream at them like, I am a human freaking being. Yeah. I am not perfect, and I know you know that I'm not perfect. Why are we playing out this story where you treat me as though you expected me to be perfect? When all along we had a real solid agreement, which was I will not be perfect. Like you know this, I know this, and I know you would not say it. That's the thing, right? Is nobody would actually say, yes, Pastor, I demand that you do everything right. But then the minute you don't do something that they want you to do, or you do something they don't like, they treat you in a way that reveals that, no, they actually do sort of expect you to be something other than who you are. And I don't really know what to do with that.
Well, and we've sort of created this narrative in the church, which is the pastor, they're always going to be like the board and the pastor are going to be at odds, or the church and the pastor are going to be it's almost like that, at least in my upbringing, it always seemed like there was some sort of conflict within church where somebody was mad at the pastor and the pastor was kind of having to push back on it. And I think part of the problem is we've set church up, and it's become such a thing that this is what people feel like they should do or get to do, or it's not that, hey, this is community, we're all doing this and discovering it together. It's, hey, we have these rules, let's not break them. And if we think somebody's breaking them, then we have to sort of expel that person from the community. I mean, and people just are living out this generations old pattern that they've seen take place in church.
Totally.
They saw their parents get mad at the pastor.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. One of my family's favorite shows is Survivor. And most of the early part of pandemic was consumed with us just binging all of the Survivor seasons, except a couple that sort of, because Kate and I have been watching the show almost since it came out, and then our kids got into it over the last couple of years. And one of the seasons that we skipped, I think it's season 24, we're going back and rewatching it now because we've gone through everything. We're watching it, we skipped it, and I'm going somewhere with this story. The premise of the season was that there's two tribes, and they put them all on the same island. So normally the two tribes would be on different islands or different parts of the island building up their camps, and then they would meet for competitions, etc. But the premise of this is that the two tribes, they put them actually on the same beach where they all supposed to live together, but as two tribes. And then to make it even more intense, they divided it between men and women, which was a complete failure of a social experiment. They never tried that gimmick again. But we're like 2 episodes in, and you talk about the cultural narratives, the stories that we just sort of unconsciously play out because we think they're true. Like that's happening in the Survivor season where you have the women tribe at tribal council with Jeff saying, well, if this, like, the reason why we're bickering and we can't get along is because that's just how women communicate. They don't know how to say what needs to be said. If this were the men tribe, they would just say what needs to be said and not. And you hear these tropes, these ideas that are not true. Like I'm like, actually, I know most of the men I know would not say what needs to be said, and the women that I know would say what needs to be said. So but we have these stories that we just sort of culturally live out. And so I even as you're talking about the story of, yeah, you bring a pastor in and you love them in the beginning, and then at some point you have to sort of turn on them and have this contingency, and you're always putting out these fires. It's like, freaking hey, can we just say that doesn't have to be that way? It doesn't have to be that way.
It could be funner if it wasn't.
It could be a whole lot more fun if it wasn't. All right. I love you. Okay, I got a few questions here I want to throw at you. Yep. These are the questions that we've been exploring here the last couple of weeks as I've been sort of relaunching this book, which I know you were an early and ardent supporter of. In fact, I was even going to come out and hang out with you in Nashville on the book tour that never was. Whatever.
But maybe will be.
Yes, but maybe will be. I like where your head is at. And so I've been sort of relaunching it this month. And so these are the questions that we've been exploring here via Perspective Shift. And I'm going to throw them at you, and I'd love to know what comes up for you. So the first is this. Joshua Scott, what was the hardest part of your shift?
Yeah, it wasn't. I tell you what, it wasn't. It wasn't like letting go of the theology that I grew up with, or that. None of that was hard. It just felt natural to me. The hardest part for me was ultimately losing relationships, and it was, it was all sorts of relationships, things I just never expected. Whether like now, 20 years after, I look back to the community I grew up in, the church I grew up in, the church that let me cut my teeth preaching some really bad sermons. My pastor from there who trained me as a 17-year-old, started training me on how to do pastoral care visits and just the whole thing about around ministry. Now, like, most of those people wouldn't touch me with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
Thinking about the emails I've received from mentors who have called me heretic, who have broken off fellowship with me, like won't even have lunch with me because they're afraid it's contagious, I guess. And then how it's complicated family relationships. It's made those the relationships you had, that one of the things, like, we just all agree on everything. So it made it super easy. And then now it's like we actually don't agree on maybe anything. And it's just made those relationships really, really odd and strained. And so the hardest part has been, like, I had all these people, like when I hear about people going back to their hometown or connecting with people from the past, I'm like, gosh, I don't feel like I could do that. Yep. And so it's almost like there's this big chunk. The first half of my life was spent in a place and with people who put their seal of approval on my ministry when they ordained me, but now wouldn't do that. They wouldn't. They would say I'm just sort of a heretic who nobody should listen to. And so that part has been, of course, you always act like, I always say, oh, it doesn't matter. But when you're, like, thinking about those things and you're reminiscing and going down memory lane, those things actually, those are wounds, and they hurt. Yep. They hurt. And you struck a chord with some of our viewers here. Alex says, the relationships. There's a real pain there. M. Corey Dandridge says, same for me, Josh. Loss of relationships. Mercy, yes. Corey. Losing relationships. Oh, you know Corey? Oh, great. Yeah, he's a grace pointer. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I think he's told me that before. I love that. And Ben, what's up, Ben Grace Gilmore? Ben's here. Yes. You finally have a contagious Christianity.
Yes, that's what it is now. Finally, you have a Christianity that people are afraid of is contagious. I love that. Okay, second question, Joshua. And this is the one that I know you were on the program earlier. I'm not going to pretend you were paying attention, but this is the one I talked about today, and we talked about this last week, is what's been the most surprising when you think about your shift?
Yeah, I really resonate with some of what the people who responded to your post said. I think the most surprising thing for me is that I've become much more of, if I am at all, I've become much more of a mystic now than I was before. So God is just really a mystery to be explored for me, and a reality that I think I've actually come to experience in a more real way than I ever had in my life.
Wow!
Back when God was defined by all these doctrines and kept in all these boxes and categories, it was almost like I go back to being at seminary and taking classes on the Trinity and the Godhead, which sounds like it's like something alien from outer space. But going through all those, it was very surgical. It was almost like being back in anatomy class in high school where we were dissecting the frogs, and I didn't want to touch it, so I let my lab partner do it. That's how I ultimately felt about God. Is like, I don't want anything to do with that. That seems like it's uninspiring. It's surgical. It's kind of sterile. It's not engaging. And now I have less dogmatic, maybe no dogmatic opinions about what God is or what the word God means, but I think I experience it more, and it feels more. Somebody asked me the other day, "Do you believe in God?" And that question now just seems absurd to me, right? Because
say more about that. Say more about that.
It's not even a category of belief.
Okay.
Right? It's a category of experience, and so whatever that reality is, or whatever that experience is, I don't know, but I do know that I feel connected to other human beings in a way that I never have before. I feel connected to the earth in a way I never have before. And I think that bond that connects us all is what the word God is, winking and nudging at. And so, do I believe in reality? Yes, I do. Do I believe in this connection? Do I believe that there's an energy that is pulling us all forward toward more love, more justice, more compassion, more goodness? Yeah, I do believe that is a real thing. Not because it's something I'm checking off in the boxes in my head, but because it's something that I'm experiencing in my own reality.
Yeah. By the way, viewers that don't know this, Josh also writes a fantastic Substack newsletter article that you should go check out. What's the link for that, real quick?
I think it's just Josh Scott.
.substack.com. Okay. Yeah. And I'm subscribed because you're fantastic and I love you. And the other day you sent out a newsletter, an article that talked about how the challenge of responding to questions like that. Do you believe in God? Where there is an implicit assumption that there should be a clear and simple, relatively simple answer, like a yes or no answer to these questions. And then what I've found oftentimes is when you refuse to meet them in that sort of binary, oversimplified reduction ground, and you want to do things like, well, can we talk about what we mean by God first before I answer that? Yeah. The minute you do that, then it's like seen as avoiding the question or being uncertain about what you believe, which is ironic in its own way. But even as you're saying now about that you're surprised at sort of how you've embraced a more mystical approach to God and just that what it's like to respond to people when like, do you believe in God? Well, I believe. Can I hold on? Like, first, let's talk about I believe. It's complicated, and that's not a bad thing. And yet, you and I came from worlds in which that is viewed as a bad thing.
Yeah, and we oversimplified it. I mean, Christian pastors have oversimplified, and we've and I use we as the collective we, but specific to individuals. But we've sort of created this, like, if you can't answer it yes or no, then you don't have the faith like a child, right? It's not simple enough.
Right.
But I think by oversimplifying it, we've created this sort of monstrosity where if you don't just check off the boxes, you're in big trouble. But I also, I mean, part of it is wanting to be clear. I want to be clear. I don't want people to, do you believe in God? Yes. And then they walk away thinking, I believe in the God of supernatural theism who exists somewhere up there, out there, who pops in every now and then to do cool magic tricks and then goes back. No, I don't believe in that God.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that God.
Yeah.
But I do have a God that I'm convicted I can experience and have a relationship with. And I'd be happy to talk about that.
Yeah. Question number 3. My friend, what are you most grateful for right now as you reflect on the fact that you have shifted? You have moved away from a more conservative evangelical version of this faith into something more progressive. What are you most grateful for in that?
People who know me may want to take issue with this. I feel like I'm a better human being. I really do. Like, I feel like I'm a better human being. And some of you may be going, man, what was he like before? If this is better, what was he like before? But I feel like a better human being. I feel like I'm able to approach human beings now at that level of humanity, as opposed to seeing them as projects that I need to convert.
Yeah.
Or, things that need to be fixed or problems that need to be solved, which is sort of how we're trained as pastors. Is everybody out there is somebody you need to either convert or you need to get them to make these decisions. And for me, it's being able to just approach people as human beings. It's being able to actually care about the needs of the world without having some sort of ulterior motive. Like I can do something good in the world and I don't have to include a tract with it so that somebody could accept Jesus at the end of the conversation, not the bait and switch. And I'll also say I'm so grateful that whatever that word God is pointing to, the way I understand that reality now is that God is safe to be close to. Because the God I grew up with and the Jesus I grew up with didn't feel safe to be close to. You just never, and I grew up, we grew up Free Will Baptist. We became liberals and went to the Southern Baptist Church eventually. But growing up Free Will Baptist, we never knew where we stood. Like, you could lose your salvation as easily as I lose my car keys on a regular basis.
That's stressful.
And so I developed terrible sleep patterns as a kid. Like, I couldn't sleep at night because the rapture was going to happen. Or I was going to die, and either way, meeting God or meeting Jesus did not seem like a fun, safe, good thing to do. And I actually I see a sleep specialist, and he asked me, "Why do you think you have trouble sleeping?" And I just laid out my theological upbringing. And he just looked at me and said, "That'll do it." So having the possibility of becoming a better human. And a God that can be, because we were also sort of like, becoming a better human is not, being good is not the point. It's about being saved. Like, why is being good bad?
Yeah. Right.
Why is becoming better a bad goal? Why is that the wrong goal?
Yeah. It's a really good question. When I think about the myriad straw men that our more conservative siblings in the faith make of us progressives, yeah, one of those straw men is like, it's not just about being a good person. It's like, it kind of is, though. Like, it's not
about that.
That's not about that. It's like, it's not, the counterfactual to that is it's about being a not good person. But I know what
Jesus said it's about fruit, right? And then they're like, yeah, but what do you believe about the Nicene Creed?
Oh God, the Nicene Creed. Tell you what,
I don't use 4th century language to talk about God. That's what I told somebody recently. I got like a uninvited inquisition in my Facebook Messenger, and I was just like, I just don't use 4th century language to talk about God anymore. I don't think we should. I think it misses the point.
I was just reading about the Nicene Creed. Bart Ehrman is doing a current series on one of his blogs about the Nicene Creed, and I know I've studied it before in the past, but then you learn things and you forget things. But I totally forgot that it was the whole council at Nicaea was organized by Constantine, who had just converted to Christianity and wanted to sort of make that the official religion of the empire, and yet was aware that within, hold on to your seats, people, became aware of the fact that within the Christian faith there was a pretty significant plurality of beliefs, and that wasn't that bad of a thing. Like, in terms of the actual Christian faith, like, there were just many ways that people believed things. Where it got where that got no longer okay was when you could no longer efficiently organize an empire around a state religion that had such a diverse plurality. Like suddenly now that's a problem. Now it's a problem that there's diversity of belief. And so Constantine organizes this council, invites some of the leading bishops to all come and to sort of do this. And they were debating primarily between Arius and Athanasius about, it was Jesus, and this is super boring from imagining, let's see, there's 46 people currently watching. I imagine 44 of you are like, move on with the next question. But they were debating the thing that the whole council hinged on was Jesus always eternally coexistent, equal with God? Or did Jesus eventually become begetted, created by God, and so therefore was slightly different and slightly subservient? And that was Arius was like, no, God has always existed, but then beget / sort of created Jesus. And then Athanasius was like, nope, Jesus and God always from the beginning. And eventually that one was the majority. And then Constantine's like, I need all of you to get on board with that so that we can get this program going. And that's the Nicene Creed, is like, here is this official stamped version of it, which is fine insofar as I get it that it's more efficient to kind of like get everybody on the same page when you're trying to lead this massive thing. But my point in all of that, if I even have one, was to say that there existed for several centuries within the Christian faith a diversity of ways of thinking about it, and it wasn't the end of the world. It only became the end of the world when sort of power and influence and control was at stake.
Yeah, Nicaea was a brokered convention.
Yeah.
Right, ultimately, and we're still like it's an empire creed.
Yeah. All right. Karen laughed at us and called us nerds.
I embrace it.
Logan says, the only people who talk about the Nicene Creed are those who want you to know that they know about the Nicene Creed. How dare you? How dare you? You don't know me. That might be exactly... That's my brother, by the way, everybody. Yeah, Alex, the Nicene Creed was a 4th century document. Well, at this point, I think you probably picked up on it. 4th century document that now is looked at as kind of like the definitive doctrinal statement for Christianity. But evangelicals have their own way of thinking about every line in it, and they think they've got this unbroken line from Nicaea to Piper. Okay, moving on. I've got one last question for you, brother. What do you love most about your new and or miss most about your old expression of faith?
There's not much. I don't really know of anything I miss.
Okay.
I love the uncertainty.
Okay.
I love the idea that there's still something to discover. Because what it used to feel like is, like we get handed this stuff. This is all the right beliefs about everything. Don't deviate from it. Don't question it. Just keep talking about it. And now I regularly can go to the Bible and find something new and exciting and inspiring that I didn't see before. Or I can have a thought about some bit of theology and I could have a new and exciting thought about it that I'd never had before. And it doesn't mean all of them are right or valid or whatever.
Right.
But it does mean that there's room to play here and there's room to reimagine. And what I like to talk about, like the work I feel like I'm here to do in the world, is to help people reimagine, reframe, and reclaim
Love that.
the Christian tradition. Because for so many of us, it just stopped working in the way that it still works for a whole lot of other people. And so what does it look like to say, we actually we're not going to give away the Bible, we're not going to give away the language, we're actually going to reimagine them and reframe them, and we're going to reclaim them as part of our faith. And so for me, being able to approach things with a fresh perspective and new eyes and discover something brand new to me, not brand new in history, but brand new to me, and then to share that with people and see it sort of like all the little lights on their dashboard light up. That's my favorite thing. I love that.
And thank you for sharing that. And I love that you are currently in a church context where that is welcome, where that is encouraged, where that is allowed, where that's celebrated. I know a little bit about the tension that was in your heart and soul, especially the final years there in Kentucky. And so to know that you are now in Grace Point, where you can invite people to do that reclaiming and reimagining, and they'll go with you.
Excitedly.
It's
a gift.
It is a gift. It is a gift. And Kate and I have a similar community out here in San Diego that is just a precious gift to us in that way. And it warms my soul to know that you are there at Grace Point doing your work, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Josh, thank you for making time for us. Tell your kids thank you for letting me steal you away from them for a bit. You have been a gift to me in my personal life. You've been a gift professionally. People in the comments, I hope you go back and sort of look at the Facebook and YouTube video and experience the love that people have been giving you throughout this. It has been good to have you. And one more time, everyone go check out joshscott.substack.com. If you're on Facebook, Ben Grace Gilmore, put that link in the comment section. Thanks, Ben, for doing that.
Thanks,
and check
Grace.
out.
And Colby, same, man. I hope we're post-pandemic. I hope we're in the same place again very soon.
Heck yeah.
And who knows what'll happen.
Who knows? But it will be tomfoolery with a capital T of this, I'm sure.
That's right.
All right. Love you, buddy. Take care.
Man. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Isn't he great? I just heart that guy with much of my life. Thanks everyone for being with me today. Again, if you haven't yet done so and you want to, I'd love for you to subscribe if you're watching on the YouTubes. And if you are on the Facebooks and you can also like my page. Totally optional, but might be helpful for communication and other things of that sort. And then tonight, if you want to come back, if you've got nothing else to do, or even if you have some things to do, maybe change your plans. Because Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, my wife Kate and I do what's called the Kate and Colby Show. I know, creatively named, right? We do that live at 7 p.m. On Kate and Colby Show, Facebook and YouTube. And tonight we're going to be joined by this guy right here, Tim Whitaker, who recently started an Instagram platform called @TheNewEvangelicals. And Tim has been all about the work of helping people sort of process and prophetically speak against the dangers and the complications and the problems of evangelicalism. And that Instagram platform has really taken off. And so we're excited to have Tim on tonight to talk about that whole experience and what it's been like. So come back tonight, 7 p.m. and it would be great to get to have you with us tonight. Anyway, that's it for me. I'll see you next Wednesday at 2 p.m. as we keep doing this thing together. Love you guys. Bye. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Perspective Shift. I'm going to now invite you to do one of three things, or do them all if you're an overachiever. First, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my free Perspective Shift newsletter. You can do that by going to colbymartin.substack.com. This will ensure that each week the articles that I write arrive safely in your inbox. Second, if you're watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and hit subscribe on my channel. That'd be awesome. And or if you're watching this on Facebook, would you click like on my page? For me, this is a win-win in that it helps me know that you're out there and that you care. Plus, it helps you know when I'm going live. For all my other work, including books that I've written or sermons that I've preached, head on over to colbymartinonline.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me live next week.